Welcome everybody. This is your Nature Journal Educators Forum. It is our weekly meeting space to talk about best practices in education and nature journaling. And it seems to be where we get some of the best kind of cutting edge conversations in the nature journaling community these days. I'm really delighted that all of you are here. Um, if you um, if you have if you're new to this, it's a discussion forum. And so um, we want to hear from you about your ideas. We want to hear from other people as well. So we're going to, so even if you're new to this, if you've got something that is useful to add to the conversation, we invite you to do that. We have one rule in this community, and that is that we treat each other with kindness. And as long as you're down with that, the microphone's yours, right? This is today's discussion is part two of our conversation about accessibility and nature and nature journaling. And yes, our previous conversation was really interactive. What I'm going to do is I'm going to first bounce over to Billy Joe to get us started. When we're in the green room, a conversation began with what you were saying, and what we realized is we just need to get everybody in here. And so, could you share some of that?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. So we were just chatting in the green room and about like what we should do for session 2. And so one of the things that I sort of recapping was that it was a great conversation last week, and we sort of worked together to identify all of the barriers, or many of the barriers that we were sort of seeing with nature journaling. And that this session, what I would personally like to see is us moving forward and to start to come up with ideas of how we can move past the barriers and really sort of use all of our collective minds to be able to come up with some really great ideas. But I wanted to make sure we didn't forget about ideas that were brought up from last week. And so just to sort of reiterate some of those things is that Avea had mentioned 3 accesses. So we talked about access to nature, we talked about access to nature journaling, and we talked about access to nature journaling community. And Scott was one of the people who had mentioned that Zoom has made nature journaling much more accessible for lots of people sort of in and around the world through Wild Wonders and all those kind of things. And so one of the thoughts that he had was, is there a possibility that we could make a nature journaling online community where for the people who can't get outside, and then would there be, potentially people who could go outside or have access, do sort of virtual tours. And then because we have this amazing international community, that we could potentially be doing some of those virtual tours and kind of get a sneak peek into some of the behind the scenes of where other folks are living and kind of, learn a little bit of extra pieces. So I think that was the big messaging, is to remember those 3 things that we were sort of focusing on last week, and then to really come up with how do we move forward in nature journaling and how do we overcome some of these accessibility issues collectively as a group to put things into action. So that was sort of what we had started with in the green room. Is that good, Jeff?
That's fantastic. And now, Avea, you had an idea that dovetailed into that.
Just that we were all on the same page, it seems like, with Billy Joe, because myself, Rosa, Scott, Sydney, and some others have been having an ongoing thread since Wild Wonder ended a few weeks ago. And we were talking since last week about it. And that was exactly what we'd been saying we wanted to talk about, particularly about different strategies and solutions to do with each of those access barriers. And then also about, well, there's more, but I want to let Rosa, Scott, and Sydney be able to talk about it for their own words. So I'm going to pass to Rosa, and yeah, thank you.
Actually, but before we do, just want to give people kind of a framing of what we're going to be doing. We're going to be hearing some of the thoughts that have been kind of going on in this thread. And then we'll hear from you folks in conversation if anybody wants to contribute to that before we break out into 3 breakout rooms, one for talking about access to nature, one about access to nature journaling, and the other about the access to community. And then we'll come back together and share the fruits of all those thoughts. So that's a little bit where we're going today. And Rosa, thank you so much for being part of this conversation and for being with us today.
Oh, sure. It's a delight. Chimmy is also here, so we have a cat listening in. And I'm actually just going to take the ball and then throw it to Scott. Because there was, Scott was traveling, I think, and I thought he might not be here today, that gave me a prompt to go back to those email threads and make sure that I found like the most important things that he'd said. And I'd like to just toss those out. So he came up with a framework for how he categorizes adaptations, which of course he can talk more about now. But the three aspects were assistive devices, adaptive behaviors, and then assistive organizations and professionals. And I found those to be a really fruitful way to springboard thinking about ways to adapt. And I'd love to hear him talk more about it. So, hi, Scott.
You had assistive devices, assistive organizations. What was the second one?
Adaptive behaviors.
Adaptive. Great. Scott, ball's in your court.
Yes. Well, yeah, I'm really honored to be able to be sitting here with everybody discussing this again this week, and yeah, my main interest with all this right now is trying to get some of these things we've been talking about into action. And for me, that means what I found most helpful to me with my issues is being able to engage with people in Zoom meetings. And that translates so easily to nature journaling, as evidenced by the Wild Wonder conferences that we participate in. You know, having that online has just been a complete blessing for someone like me. And some of the things that I find helpful in thinking about, well, how if we would set up a online Zoom meeting for Nature Journal Club with I'm not the one that coined this term, it's used quite often, but the descriptor for a group for people like us would be access-ability, because we're more concerned with what our abilities are, not what our limitations are. And so we don't want a group where we're going to come and whine and sit in self-pity with what we deal with. We're going to come and celebrate the challenges that we've overcome and how we do that, and help each other find those avenues for living. And as Rosa was saying, you know, I actually keep a list since I was diagnosed with MS a number of years ago, which is a progressive thing. So I constantly am losing new things that I have to adapt to. I find that having an ongoing written list of these things and those three categories that Rosa mentioned actually helps me in my mental state of I can look back and say, look what I've done here. I can do it again. I can find another way. And, you know, sharing these things with people, I think, is a good way to encourage each other in our community. And, you know, developing those assistive devices, kind of deciding, you know, well, what would that look like? What's an assistive device in an accessibility type nature journal online group? Well, for me, that's a number of things. That's a big screen to look at. You know, I have visual impairment. So it's I guess for each person looking at what do you consider your limitations and what would help you with adapting to that. You know, visual things, obviously, the bigger you can see them, the better you can see them. Mobility issues in a Zoom meeting. I love Zoom meetings where, you know, I apologize, I cannot remember the presenter's name during the conference that was talking about the boxy animals. I loved it when he had the dance break in the middle. You know, for somebody with mobility issues, it's good to get up and move a little bit. It helps the limbs stay alive a little bit better, you know, in the situation. And so those are the kind of things I think about with what would an online meeting look like. You know, structuring things around, well, you know, some people can't use a mouse pad. So how can they, what can the meeting do to make things a little bit better for people like that? And, you know, in my mind, that would be like sending out PDFs of different things ahead of time, so a person could actually have the physical papers in front of them if they wanted to print off a presentation that was being done, you know, a PowerPoint, something like that. You know, adaptive behaviors, I think that would just be a natural outflow of an online group like this, because, you know, when you sit in a circle with someone that, I hate to use the word malady, but when you sit in a circle with someone that has the same challenges or maladies that you have, and you see how they adapt to it, it helps you in your own walk. You know, it's like going to a buffet table, and people come and share everything that they bring to the table. You can pick and choose what works for you, and you don't have to take what won't work for you. You know, that's the beauty of a circle like this. And, you know, those behaviors, I think, just naturally will get better for people the more we can share those kind of things. Because, you know, when you deal with some of these things, it's pretty easy to get on the pity pot. Well, that does nothing positive for anybody. Doesn't do anything positive for yourself, or definitely doesn't do anything positive for those around you. You know, and so it's good to just have that format again. I think would be great for that. And then that third category, assistive professionals. You know, there's as we deal with whatever we're dealing with, it's good to be aware of things in our communities where there are professionals that can help give us advice, you know, maybe give us, in some cases, maybe some financial assistance with things, you know. And a perfect example of that for me, when I started losing my eyesight, and I'm blind in one eye, there's an organization in Iowa called the Iowa Commission for the Blind and Physically Handicapped. Well, at that point, I was still working in the hospital. I was also working full time. I had an art studio. All that stuff started going south with my vision. And they actually came out, they spent a day with me at my work. They spent a day with me in my art studio. They spent a day with me in my home, just seeing how I live. There's organizations, I think, in every state that do things like that. And this was all free of charge. You know, it's, as a taxpayer, these organizations are created for us to use, but I didn't know anything about it until somebody told me about it. And it was just a happenstance thing that came up in a conversation. You know, and through that, I acquired devices of, you know, like this thing here is called an Acrobat. It's a camera on an arm that is hooked up to a huge monitor that's sitting right in front of me. I can zoom in on things that I'm working on. I'm a wood carver, you know, so I make things like this. And it's hard to wood carve when you're half blind, you know, and this thing helped me be able to do that. And, you know, that same organization hooked me up with people at a facility where they actually bring you in and train you. They saw what I did. They saw I'm a wood carver. Oh, we've got a totally blind wood carver that works and teaches people how to carve blind. So I went and I actually learned how to carve with my eyes closed in preparation for what I know is coming with my disease. And these kind of organizations are out there. It's just a matter of, how do you find out about them? Well, you find out about them from somebody else who already knows about them. Those are the kind of things I think an online circle group could be great at. You know, I see the structure of a group like that of, you know, we have a set amount of time for saying, hey, this is something I'm struggling with that I have to try to adapt to. Is there anybody else out there that's dealing with that? You know, maybe spend 15 minutes in the in that discussion part that could potentially go towards whining, but not let it go there. You know, we can help each other pass those moments. And then maybe go into the session of doing a skill part of the meeting, you know. Easy things for that would, you know, John is so great about sharing his free videos that he does with techniques, you know, and those are things with the Zoom meeting that's easy to share in a group setting, and then come back together and discuss, okay, I would struggle with doing this. How could I adapt to maybe doing that part of that technique? And then do it, you know, doing the virtual tours like Rosa said. You know, my mind is so full of things to try to do, it's hard to get them all out, you know, but it's just encouraging to me that we're sitting in a group talking about this. And I would just love to see the group get formed. For me, I tend to be impatient with things. I like to plan adequately for things. I was a middle school math and science teacher, and I know the importance of planning, goal setting, task analysis, all that. But man, when it comes down to it, I just want to get in and start doing it. You know, so.
Yeah. May I ask you a couple of questions, Scott? So one is, I hear you saying that a regular online meeting group would be a useful thing for this community. Would also an online written discussion forum be a useful adjunct to that? I'm not saying instead of, but in addition to. Would that be useful?
Oh, I think definitely for, you know, and there again, that depends on, you know, some people would want to participate in that,
right?
Some would not. It depends on what their needs are. But if it's not made available,
yeah,
nobody's going to benefit from it. So
I want to pop in and just to take the ball for a second and throw it again. Sydney was looking at aspects of web accessibility, and in thinking about what an online written based forum might look like, obviously web accessibility is something we would want to address. And I don't know what else Sydney found out about that, but hi, Sydney. It's great to have you here.
Hi, yes, I don't know a ton about it because I mostly worked in transcript writing and closed caption writing for video content. But I did find a website that lays out what an accessible web page looks like and the kinds of things that you would have to have in order to qualify for like a certification or whatever. But I shared that link with Ivea, and I can share it with the group here as well. Yeah, but there are some gold standards of web accessibility. I know a big thing for the visually impaired is contrast, making sure that all of our visuals, text are both large enough for those people to see, but also that they don't mesh with any background colors. Additionally, there are some formatting things that need to happen in order for those who use auto readers that read the text on a page. And there are certain ways to format text so that those devices can actually read it fluently. And again, I don't know very specifically the technical side of it, but I can find that link and send it. Oh, okay, I already did. Thank you.
And as we, so that brings us to the WCAG2 overview for the Web Accessibility Initiative. All right, we will check that out. And also, as I'm thinking that, you know, this is coming at a timely moment when the Wild Wonder Foundation has just launched a new website, but it's small at this point. It's going to be growing. I wonder about having, one of the things we've discussed is having embedded in that discussion forums for different topics. And this would definitely be one of those topics that this should be sort of a meta category, in addition to just sort of thinking about how we design that website. for getting groups, sort of circles going, where we for discussing anything. In this community, the bar for entry into that is very, very low. Nobody needs to be an expert, but what they do need is just a little bit of organizational chops. So being able to figure out what the agendas are going to be for different discussion meetings, and the agendas, like for instance, for these meetings, our agendas are really loose. But for making this educators forum, what we did is I started running it on my own, and more people got interested in it, and Avea and then Billy Joe stepped in also as co-hosts to help run the thing, and actually having this little triad of people seems to be a great way of making something like that happen. For a discussion circle to happen online, I think all we would need initially is to find one person who'd be willing to kind of initially spearhead it until they can find other people who want to join in that team. And then we, the Wild Wonder Foundation, could supply a Zoom account for those discussions. I see that Bill has his hand up, and also Avea. Bill, let's bring you into the discussion. I'm going to add you into the spotlight, and you can now unmute. Thank you for being with us.
Hi. I just wanted to briefly talk about another group that I'm in that does something a little bit like what you're talking about here in terms of having a regular online meetup. And it may be quite a bit different from what we would end up doing, but I wanted to throw it out here as an example to talk about some of the ways that this could potentially push off into. What I'm doing right now, as I watch you guys, I'm sorting Lego, which is one of my other hobbies, and we have this group that meets once a week, started since October of 2020, called Sort Lug, which is the Lego users group for sorting. And it grew out of a convention that we had online, and everybody just wanted to keep on meeting it. It sounds a little bit like what Scott is saying about, having really gotten a lot out of the online Wild Wonder and wanting to keep on meeting. And so basically, in theory, what happens is every Friday night from 5 p.m. Pacific to 5 a.m. Pacific, 12 hours, because we have people all over the world, from Australia, from Europe, etc., who want to participate. And the hosting of the event hands off from one person to another as it goes around the clock. And it's just a completely unscripted, unagendaed forum for just hanging out, doing the thing, and chatting with people. And I can easily see that could translate well into nature journaling. Maybe not exactly the same format, but hypothetically speaking, to take the Sort Lug idea and translate into nature journaling language, there would be some people who might be, out in a park somewhere with their phones, chatting on the thing while they did some sketching. There might be some people who would be in their backyards, or just sitting in their living room sketching a houseplant, or maybe just sitting and talking and just talking. If somebody is out in a park sketching a really interesting mushroom, they might share that on their video, and other people might sketch it as well, or just discuss its attributes. Very loose and unstructured, I think, would work well for this activity. And it doesn't have to be particularly well organized. That's just one way of doing it. And what often happens is in the wee hours of the morning, when a lot of the Americans have logged off and gone to bed, some of us on the West Coast and some of us in Australia and a few other places, we end up just I mean, I find it to be a great source of emotional support. I've talked about, we talk about ADHD, for example, and some of the different ways that we get support, because a lot of us have ADHD. Seems like a pretty high crossover between the Lego hobby. And so a lot of that sort of thing. And I just wanted to mention it because as I'm sitting here doing that activity and hearing you talk about this activity, it seemed to me like a natural connection. So just an idea. Just want to share that.
Great. Thank you so much, Bill. Billy Joe.
Yeah, so I was just thinking we kind of have two forums outside of this one that are kind of already starting and that have been running for a while. And I'm wondering if we can just sort of like piggyback onto those ones or sort of develop those a little bit more. And the first one I'm thinking is Ask Jack, right? So that is a space where you are actually teaching how to do something. So can we do something with that? And the other one is Avea's Pencil Miles and Chill, which is a community. So now I understand that those are both things that are being run in the West Coast. So for everybody sort of east or outside of that, or sort of out of that, but are we able to just sort of create something similar to that, but with West or like sort of East Coast people, but run along the same sort of line so that we're not sort of reinventing the wheel, but just creating something that's more accessible in terms of time zone? Because that's Avea's Pencil Miles and Chill, from anything I've ever experienced, is that people are nature journaling and they're chatting and they're sort of all together within that community. And then if you want to learn how to do something specific, then you go to Ask Jack, and then there's some chatting and stuff like that involved in there. Like, I'm not sure if we could just sort of do something with the two of those things. Maybe the people who run them.
So I was trying to raise my hand in the chat function, and then I realized I was a host and I didn't have to do that. So I'm hearing a few different kinds of group ideas come up, and I just wanted to pull those out so that we can maybe think about them. One thing I'm hearing is that we want all of our nature journaling practices, groups, to have be more mindful about accessibility. I'm also hearing that we might want to have access-oriented, focused group that meets regularly online, where part of what we discuss might formally be, or informally, as the case may be, but where the topics of discussion are explicitly about access, ability, disability, adaptations, that kind of thing. And then I'm also hearing that a looser kind of structure where that is a possible topic of discussion, but maybe not the main one, might be a nice space as well. So more hanging out, less focused on solutions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that what other people are hearing?
I think that's right. And something that I would I think that the one that is specific to kind of problem solving about and sort of deliberately addressing accessibility is a little bit is closest to what Scott you were describing. Am I correct? And we could start that group tomorrow, right? Or today, right? All we would need to do is to find if there was an individual, or if there were a group of people that would like to come together as a team. And by the way, I've found that doing this with a little team is so much more fun. It really kind of doing the educator forums on my own was good. But when Avea came on and then Billy Joe came on, the whole process became a lot more interesting and a lot more fun and a lot more sustainable for me. And so I would think that that if what we need is for somebody I would, if somebody came on as a said I'd like to help moderate, I would get a Zoom account for that person. I would train that person how to load event descriptions onto the Nature Journal Club community calendar. It could be a regularly sort of scheduled, just like Educators Forum, the accessibility forum, or you come up with a better name for it, right? And um, and that would then go on the community calendar, and people would be able to see it and show up for it. And if the people who were kind of taking point on that wanted to do it more frequently, they could make that decision on their own. If they wanted to do it less frequently, they could make that decision on their own. If they realized we don't want to do it next week or next month, they could take those off and just sort of do that sort of a program as they saw fit. Is there anybody who would be interested in being involved as a moderator for a forum like that?
There's already 4 of us.
Okay.
Right.
So, Avea,
Rosa, Scott, and Sydney.
okay.
Sure.
You've got 4. Actually, you know what? I think with the 4 of you, it's going to be really fun.
I also see that Robin is interested.
Robin's also interested? Excellent. Well, let's bring Robin into the conversation, add you into the spotlight, and you can now unmute. Hey, Robin, thank you so much for being with us.
Hi everyone. Nice to be here.
Thank you for being with us.
Yeah.
You would also like to be part of Team Access?
Yeah, sure. Sure. You know, I've dealt with a lot of handicap issues in my family, and I have friends, you know, that are handicapped, and you know, it's a natural discussion I have almost weekly with them. So
Excellent, excellent. Would you send your email to Avea?
I will.
And and Avea, you know how to load things up onto the calendar. If another person also wants to have access as somebody who can do that, so that it's not all on your shoulders, you just let me know what people would like to do that, and we can make them also authors on that website. Soon, all that functionality that it is currently on johnmuirlaws.com, it is going to be moving over and embedded into the Wild Wonder page. But currently, until that happens, the community calendar functionality is all on my website. Sydney, yes.
I just wanted to mention Kate Ryder, I believe, brought up an excellent point, which is would the access focused group be open to educators coming in and asking specific questions about how to support students? And I thought that was an important thing to address. This is not, to my understanding, I don't want to speak for anyone else on the screen right now, but from what I have heard from all of us, this group is not exclusive to those who specifically have diagnoses, specific issues. This is for all of us who want to bring these ideas to mind more frequently. So if you're an educator, if you're a parent, if you are just anyone who wants to learn more about how to support yourself or those that you love and work with, please come hang out. You know?
Yeah. Kate, you're already a force in this community, and you'd be welcome on any of our forums and chats.
Yeah, I guess I was just asking because I know that there's certain times where, you know, there's a desire to create a space that is for people who are dealing with the issue and not have other people coming in and going, but like, what about this? And, you know, who might be, you know, still new to it. And so because that puts you in a different position, you know, what Scott was talking about is, you know, if you're talking about your own personal life and your experience and other people who have very similar shared and lived experience, that's a different conversation than me coming in and going like, but what do you guys think about this? Can you educate me about, I have a student who just received a diagnosis and I have some questions about it. And suddenly, you're kind of being put in a position about educating me versus supporting each other. So it's just
such an important thing to bring up. Yes. Avea, I think, has some thoughts on that.
I was thinking, what if maybe this would be the sort of thing that we would have a lot more time to discuss and talk about, but what if at least as a start, we reserve the option of sometimes having meetings that will be exclusively for folks who are within the community, and sometimes for folks who, and then other meetings where it's just open to everybody. And I'm not saying that we're going to necessarily do one or the other, but it just so that way we have that option.
Mm-hmm.
But then I would think that I don't think that this is a decision we're going to be making right now, because
no,
I think that all of us have to talk about this a lot more. And generally speaking, though, I get the feeling that none of us want to be exclusive. That generally speaking, we want to invite everybody. But I think it'd be better if we talk more about it, because I think that you raise a really good point.
Yeah, and thank you. And also the fact that you ask that question means you're going to be welcome in just about any room you walk into, because you're thinking about things in a really sensitive way. That hadn't occurred to me. But so I just want to say mad props for even having that question on your radar.
Oh, I've been trained by being in like racial support groups more, and so where they're like, oh no, you're actually not really welcome to talk at this meeting, like in the most loving way, but just like, you are not experiencing this problem, and it's great that you're an ally, but like that's not what this meeting is about. And I'm like, cool, okay, thanks for letting me know. And then there's other times where it's like, no, please come. Please come and please be a part of this. So just trying to identify that within this community as well.
And Kate, thank you so much for putting those ideas on our radar. That's really useful framing. Let's see. So if there's anybody else that also wants to participate in the conversation, all you have to do is use the raise hand function. And for folks who are interested in helping moderate this, would you please send a private chat to Avea with your email, if she doesn't have that already. That will help facilitate those conversations. So this. Oh yes, Avea.
I was also going to say earlier that you were talking about the Wild Wonder website and about accessibility there, and so right after I put in Sydney's link, I also included an example of what that can look like in terms of a statement that was released on nature.com about how they have made a statement about how they make their website accessible, in case we need anything to model off of, or in case we want to look and see what else is out there, other ideas. So I wanted to recommend that link as well. And then we already figured this one out, but I was also going to say that I think it's better off to start with, if possible, with more than one leader, so that from the very beginning, it doesn't all fall on one person. And so I think it's going to be wonderful involving and inviting a lot of folks in to take part of this for us, and like everybody being welcome. And I'm also super duper thankful for Rosa, Scott, Sydney, and myself, and the teamwork that we've been able to start building. And we're looking forward to adding more people to this team.
Oh, yeah, this is great. And also, just the other day, we were talking about kind of the example of curb cuts, and about how these accommodations really kind of help all of us. I think that this is when I'm just looking around here of these accessibility guidelines, another great example of the same thing. Let's bring Marcia in on the discussion. Thank you so much for being here, and you can now unmute. Hi there.
Hi. Hey. So a couple of things that I kind of came up with while you were talking, and I'm sure somebody else has had it in their head or said something, but going back to accessibility, and you were talking about things that you might need for that, like Scott, and I had a friend who had Lou Gehrig's disease, which is ALS, and then I worked with HIV for a while in Los Angeles in a project called Project Nightlight, which was nobody nobody dies alone, and we would help them find family or different people to come be with them so that they could take care of whatever they needed to take care of to be peaceful, if you will. And my friend with ALS, of course, had one of the first computers that you blink to write or type. And she had a very simple alphabet as she got to the point where she couldn't speak. But that brings to, and I don't know what you might call it today, social services or whatever, but as Jack, you have guests on your programs, then I think that sometimes bringing guests who have information on how to get some of those things to people, maybe like once a month, would be really, really beneficial to people, because sometimes you do need to hear. So that was one avenue, I was just thinking about. And then another avenue with this accessibility around the world, I think we've talked about things like that before. Way back, we had a Zoom meeting, Jack, I think with Bethan and all these people. And so I don't know, I wrote down 11 a.m. everywhere. So that would be that time that you always knew somebody would be online going through. Again, this is just brainstorming and an idea to get that going, but there could be that, I don't know if it would be once a month or something, because I mean, I know that everybody is busy and has their things. And I personally work full-time still. So I always have said that Tuesdays look really interesting for me, that there's been always openings on Tuesday in the calendar, Jack's calendar, the community calendar, etc. I haven't gotten there yet because I work full time. I also happen to be a union site rep in the national system I'm in, which can come in waves. So anyway, those are some of the things I was just writing down on that. So
those are really useful ideas, because I'm sure that I think most of the people on this call are in North America, and we probably are seeing things also through a lens of that. I wonder if we were to broaden that lens more, what other people we could include, because I think that this tool of nature journaling is so authentically useful and relevant for everybody, that we make this world a better place by making this more accessible to more people. I also like your idea about bringing in special guests. Soon I am going to be having one of my Thursday workshops. I'm going to be bringing in a special guest who is a gentleman that I met on a recent field trip that I was leading for the Monterey Bay Birding Festival. And this fellow had a motorized chair that was set up with all these just, brilliant tools. And it turns out that the guy's an inventor. And he was like, here I am. Okay, what am I going to do about it? And so he's invented all these systems, and then also sells them to anybody else who wants them. It's like, I gotta have you on my show. So we're going to be meeting that gentleman, and I think that he might be someone who would be interested in regularly being a part of that discussion. But we should find people with really, really good ideas and bring those in. I see Avea's got her hand up, and as well as Kathleen. I don't know who is up first.
I think Kathleen was first. Let's let her first.
Kathleen, thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to bring you into the spotlight here, and you can now unmute.
Hi, thank you. I'm relatively new to the community and I love it. I've been an educator for over 20 years and I've been on disability for 3. So I really appreciate this topic, and it's my first time to this group. When I was getting ready to come to the group, I was thinking, wow, it's a huge topic. How what did I think were the categories of narrowing down accessibility? And this might have been mentioned last time, but I was thinking physical health and then mental health. I want to make sure to give a shout out to that. And sometimes they overlap, but they're distinctive needs also. So I was thinking 2 categories about health, the physical and the mental, and then kind of a third catch-all category for not necessarily health reasons, but just other barriers of why nature or nature journaling or the community isn't accessible to people, whether that just be a peer pressure thing of, oh, we don't go in nature, or maybe a family thing. Someone's got a whole bunch of kids. How do I manage taking them all out somewhere? Or a technology thing. So I just kind of wanted to throw it out there that I was kind of thinking of physical health, mental health, and then non-health related barriers, accessibility things.
So physical, mental, and other. Right. That's a very useful framing. Make sure that we are kind of thinking about those different categories. Let's go to Avea, and then let's just jump over to some breakout rooms for a little bit, bounce some ideas around, come on back, and we will wrap for the day after a little bit of sharing and reflection. Kathleen, thank you so much for those ideas. Let's see. I am.
What's wrong?
I'm trying to. Here I go. Let participants choose rooms. Right. That was what my. So I'm going to make 3 rooms. I'm going to call one nature. I'm going to call 2 nature journaling, and I'm going to call 3 community, and I'm going to let's see, Avea, before we go into open those rooms, your thoughts?
I was going to say this connects also to some different topics that we've raised before in the educators forums, but to bring them back again. Speaking on the subject of accessibility, I know that we were focused mostly on health, which was the goal for the last 2 meetings, but also to reiterate that, yeah, there are other types of accessibility. And I'd kind of had a thought that we would be that those would be individual discussions we'd be having in the future. Like there could be an entire forum that's about language and about how to make it more accessible, how to make nature journaling accessible in more languages. Then there was what others were mentioning earlier about different locations. I think Billy Joe was mentioning that it's very West Coast based, and I know that that's been a thing that's been raised in a lot of other classes in the community. And so there's talk about, how are we going to make it so that we decentralize it a little bit more and make it so that it's more everywhere, and so, location, an accessibility thing that we talk about more later. We've had a few discussions beforehand, but discussion again about maybe barriers because of ethnicity. Not fun going into a park when you are Black or part Black and having people look at you funny. And then also economics. And so I think that a lot of these are topics that we've been discussing for a while, having future discussions about that center on each of them. And so I want to say, please continue to list out those barriers so that we can continue to devote specific conversations to them and make sure that we don't forget anything or leave anything out. In fact, if people would like to, please do put those into the chat before we go to the breakout rooms as fast as you can, or if not, if you don't have to. But that way I can make sure that I have a mind sometimes that is a little bit obsessive, and I will obsessively get those on our list. And that's all I was going to say. Thank you.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back. Um, the Before we close for the day, again, let's make sure that this isn't the end of this discussion. Just a pause in the group discussion for now. Let's just hear from some people from some of the breakout rooms. Was there anything that was discussed that in your group that you think would be really useful to report out to the larger community? Also, if there's anything that for you was really standing out, let's drop that into the chat right now. And but let me first see, is there anybody from the nature group who would like to report out to the rest of the group about what you some things that, not necessarily everything that was being discussed, but something that jumped out for you? And I guess I can report on some things. So a couple of things that were interesting. We're talking about access to nature. And that can be drop in at lots of different places. One is just, how do you get there? The transportation to get there, the tools that you need to use once you get there, the mindset that says that this is a good thing to do and a good place to go. And when you get there, is there a community there that you feel a part of and you feel welcomed by? All of those things can be barriers to your access to it. And we can institutionally, within an organization, or in things which we do in our programs, try to address those sorts of things. Also, a couple of things were mentioned about things that sort of local transportation departments do, or departments of Park and Rec do, that are trying to make wild places more accessible. This stuff is very much on, say, the minds of parks. So I think that if you reach out to partners in your area, there are probably going to be people there who are looking for ways to and partners to start to work with. I think that this is something that is on lots of people's minds. For people who are looking at access to nature journaling, is there anybody in that group or community that would like to report out to us about what some discussion that you're having in your group? Laney, thank you so much for doing that. I'm going to add you into the spotlight here, and you can now unmute.
Well, hi, everybody. I think what stood out for me was how lovely and easy it is to talk with each other. How the premise of the only rule is be kind covers a lot of good ground. So that really stood out. And I don't take it for granted, although it was not unique. I mean, anytime I've encountered any human from this group, I have felt always comfortable and safe and connecting. Some of the things that came up in our group about nature journaling was we talked about accessibility in a kind of nuanced way. I talked about how, as a teacher, I want to hold a space where I can tap into and understand and learn about each student's entry point. And that it doesn't bypass the differential abilities, but it acknowledges that people who we sometimes use the term temporarily abled, those of us who are temporarily abled, we're looking at something in the future that, so that seemed to be a helpful way of thinking about it for myself, because folks don't always want to share things that are challenging for them. So it's as a teacher, as a person holding the space, figuring out in each situation what the entry points are, what the obstacles might be. And then when there's enough safety, people will disclose at whatever level they want to. And you might never know that somebody actually, is actually using their non-dominant hand because they had a stroke and they can't use their dominant hand. You might never know that unless they, so I don't want people to feel like they have to disclose things. Anyway, others in my group said some other really wonderful and tender things. And Scott talked about the way talking happens in his setting, in his community, and Bill and Lindy also talked about accessibility just to art supplies. People might want to join your nature journaling class and they've already eliminated themselves before they filled out the form, because it's like, how am I going to, I can't even, where am I going to buy pastels and I don't have the money. So those are some of the things we talked about, and maybe others in the group want to add, because it was not a summary, just the things that stood out for me.
But that's really useful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Before we bounce over to the other group, is there anybody else from the nature journaling group that wanted to share something about that conversation? And let's then bounce. Bill, thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to add you into the spotlight here, and Bill, you can now unmute.
There we go. Yeah, I just wanted to elaborate a little bit on. I think that it would be helpful for us as a community to identify nonprofit organizations that are already positioned to help people, and maybe help those organizations realize that nature journaling is a thing and help people access it. So I thought about donating art supplies to organizations that maybe help people, either poor people in poverty, people in transition, whatever it is, and identify maybe grant programs that we can either solicit money from or start granting money to such organizations in order to help put supplies in the hands of people.
I like that thought. So finding those community partners that we can work with. This doesn't have to all be on us. It's not. And but let's find people who are really good faith players and play with them. Thank you so much, Bill. Let's also join the anybody from the discussion on community that wanted to share anything from your group discussion. Sydney, thank you so much for being with us. Hey there.
Hello. We spent a lot of time just chatting, but we eventually got around to talking about what accessibility would look like for an online group specifically. And I wrote down the ideas that we brainstormed of things that we would really like to have included. And as I am on the team that is now spearheading this group, I will make sure that we bring it all together. We want to see included speakers that have great ideas to share. We want field trips from all over the world so that we can see and experience nature from wherever we're at without having to overcome the barriers of, or like financial barriers or physical barriers. We want a recording free time where we can create a safe space where people know that only the people in the room at the moment are going to be able to hear what they have to say. While we acknowledge that having recordings to watch later is great, we need some moments for people to be able to be vulnerable in a safe way. We want a time where we can talk about real world applications for after the meeting is over. So if we talked about one topic throughout the meeting, then at the end, brainstorming ideas for what we can do today to make that happen in our lives with our own issues. A forum thread, so this is going to the text option that we've been talking about for on the Wild Wonder Foundation website, having a forum thread or a document that compiles a comprehensive list of the adaptations that we've identified in these meetings with links to foundations, shops, you know, specific items that people might want to buy or know about for their own selves. And then lastly, we talked about having a designated chat reader. A lot of times people struggle to keep up with the chat, and a lot of us put a lot of cool things in the chat. So having somebody who's keeping an eye on it and raising their hand for those who are not able to speak for themselves, either for anxiety reasons or what have you, but so that those who have hearing vision issues where they can't read the chat or, you know, can't keep up, will still be able to have those great ideas. And that is our list so far.
Wow. And that, dear friends, is why we have this forum. Those ideas are so powerful, so useful, and inspiring. This is incredible. Thank you so much for sharing those thoughts. And what's neat about this is that this movement that we're a part of, it's small and it's growing and it's nimble. If you want to get involved in making these things happen, there's lots of room and lots of space for that. I think that sometimes people think that people who are really active in the community, they've got some special credential, right? That no, they just said, okay, I'll do that. I guess so. And then you're doing it, and bam, and it's fun. I also want to echo something that I heard about just how nice it is for us to be able to talk to each other and growing. And being in a community that is kind to each other. I think that makes so many other things possible.